Hi, I'm Dawn.
I'm Tim. That was easy.
And March 5th, 1988, I got to marry my very, very best friend in the whole wide world, this guy right here. That was 34 years ago this past March. It'll be 35 this next March. That's our wedding picture. It was a military wedding. I got whacked on the butt. That was wonderful with the sword at the end. And we have 3 kids and 2 grandkids. This was our daughter's wedding this last week. Our oldest daughter got remarried.
It's that one.
In the middle with the wedding dress, yeah. And they're
2 of our kids' faces are actually quite hidden. So.
yeah, and our granddaughter, and then my son's trying to eat my head. I don't know what's up with that. And my other daughter's like looking off somewhere. We don't know. But that's our big, beautiful, crazy family, and we love to have fun. I was also raised in a crazy family. I'm the youngest of 5, and there's like 35 grandkids and even more great grandkids and great grandkids from my mother. She's expecting her 3rd great grandchild right now. Great grandchild.
2 greats.
Yes.
To be able to meet your grandmother's grandmother. Think about that for a second.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
So, I was number 5, not planned. So I was kind of an oops baby, and with that, a lot of rejection. I was born in Wichita Falls, raised in southern Oklahoma on a ranch. I had 3 older brothers that, and my sister that I just didn't fit. I never felt like I fit. So I always had this rejection thing going on, and my parents were very much in a contractual marriage. If you did this, then I did this. If you followed all the rules, my dad would speak to you. And I was the most connected to my dad. So there were times that he would just quit talking for weeks at a time, just completely disconnect, which added to my rejection issues and created a vacillator attachment style. If you don't know what the attachment styles are, it's a really great thing to learn about. In the 5th grade at Falls Creek Baptist Church Camp, I found Jesus, and he became my best friend, and I figured out where I fit. It was in 1981 at the age of 16 at also Falls Creek Baptist Church Camp. They did a big call to people that wanted to be a pastor, and I was like, yes, that's it. I fit here. This is what I'm supposed to do. I walked down front. I said, yes, I want to be a pastor, and they were like, oh, honey, only guys can be pastors. You need to sit down.
Yeah. That was awesome. I still shake my head at that one. Okay. I was born in northeast Oklahoma in Tulsa, raised in Sapulpa. I don't know if you know her. Oh, wow, awesome. Very few people know what that is, but cool. Our church attendance growing up was sporadic at best. I think my mom wanted to go to church more than my dad ever did, and that kind of led to some conflicts and stuff like that. But one thing we were very, very good at is avoiding talking about anything important. And I learned that as a style to deal with conflict, is to avoid. So I'm the avoidant attachment. That's how I figure if I'm gonna get love, I need to avoid conflict. That's how I was raised. Either that or please. I was a pleaser and avoider, both. So, yeah, I was raised in that kind of home. Wasn't real chaotic or anything like that. But about junior high, my parents got divorced. It was very traumatic on me, except I refused to acknowledge it at the time. I made 2 vows. One was, I'm not gonna let this divorce affect me. And 2, I'm never gonna get divorced. I didn't realize those 2 vows contradict each other. If you don't let things affect you, all of a sudden you're just digging into the avoider thing.
Disconnect.
So yeah, it's a recipe for disconnection.
So I stayed in church, very connected, very involved in the church as I grew up. My dad was really involved in the church when the pastor was gone. He was the one that preached. He could tell you where who begot who begot who begot who. He knew all of the Old Testament by memory. He was amazing. And so I went off to college, and I was, straight A's. I was a perfect child. I was going to fulfill all the standards that my dad had set for me. And I got to college, and I met a man, and he was 6 years older than me. and he wasn't a believer, but I could save him, right? Anybody had that, yes, we can save them. Yes, we can. And he proposed to me. I was a virgin, and then after I got engaged and I slept with him, and then about a month later I found out he was married, and a week later I found out I was pregnant. So my good world, my perfect world just came, and then a week later it was finals. And so I flunked out, my world fell apart, and my dad disconnected completely from me. And I knew that things had to change. I ended up having my daughter, and because abortion was not an option, even though several people offered to pay for an abortion for me, and a couple of them offered to marry me. But Amy was 10 months old, and I had made a covenant in my heart, a vow in my heart, that I would never get married, because I had been working in child protective services and doing volunteer work, and I knew that no man would love my daughter as much as he would love his own kids. So I made a vow in my heart that I would not get married until I met my best friend. And we were best friends more than we dated, even though, as a vacillator, I would like, come close, go away, come close, go away. And finally he wore me down. And I broke up with him one time, and he says, but I love your daughter as much as I love Amy as much as I love you, and that's the one that just got married. And I was like, okay, I'll marry you on 3 conditions. Very contractual, right? I had these contractual, that's what I was raised in. So if you'll cut up your credit cards, not about them. If you'll go to Spirit-filled churches, because I'd met the Holy Spirit when I was in that season, and if he would not lie to me. And we were married March 5th, 1988.
Yep. I got, right out of high school, I always wanted to be a Navy pilot. I always wanted to fly airplanes in the Navy. So I enlisted in the Navy out of high school, not realizing that's not how you do it. I went to boot camp and got saved while I was there, came back, went to college, and in that period is when we met. And so that was basically my goal, is to start heading towards that. And getting married to Dawn, she introduced me to the Holy Spirit for the first time, and boy, did I think that was weird. But I kind of got into it, and I became Spirit-filled along the way. And yeah, but so I, Spirit-filled Christian, married to my wife, got a beautiful family, got to be a Navy pilot, finally got that done. And then about 5 years in, global stuff changes, and all of a sudden I'm not a Navy pilot anymore. And it was devastating to me. And here I am back in that pain thing, and I'm not gonna let it affect me, but it's affecting me, and I'm in this struggle of avoiding the pain in here. Holding her at arm's length, but wanting to be close, that whole thing. So it was not good. I responded by lying, because I can't tell her, I can't be honest with her what's going on here. Be angry, disconnecting. My career was kind of going down the toilet, and so was my life, honestly. Our relationship was not good. I mean, it was okay, but it's not thriving, not like it should be. I felt aimless and lost. I was not succeeding. And my life verse, if I were to tell you what my life verse was for that period of time, Romans 7:15. For the things that I want to do, I do not do. The things I do not want to do, that I keep on doing.
So I was 28 years old. Tim had just gotten out of the Navy, and we had 3 kids, and I had found my sweet spot. Isaiah 61, who had been my life verse, finally came to life. I'd been invited to move to Atlanta, Georgia, to work full-time as a youth and children's pastor. I was speaking at national youth conferences, training youth pastors all over the world, and it was amazing. And this lasted about 3 years, and I thought, I was becoming someone pretty well known at the time, but my husband was dying, and I didn't know what was going on. And so he lost his job, and I knew that the Lord was telling us it was time for me to lay down my life and choose him. And so I stepped away from my career. I resigned, much against a lot of people's wishes, And I
And
died to
advice.
self and advice. And I died to myself, and I just chose to trust God. We moved to Tyler, Texas. Not fun. And
Nothing wrong with Tyler.
I went to work as a receptionist, making minimum pay. We had 3 kids. We had $900 to our name, and he went back to school to become a commercial pilot. And I started to become bitter until I went to a women's retreat. And Hetty Lou Brook, who was over the women's retreat, I'll never forget her preaching on Romans 4:17. That's what the scripture means when it says, I have made you the father of nations. He is our example and father. For in God's presence, he believed that God can raise the dead and call forth into being things that don't yet even exist. I needed God to bring my marriage back to life. He had made a promise to me of what my marriage, and I knew, as I grew in the prophetic, I knew what this man was supposed to look like. And I needed to align my words and my actions, and I started calling forth things that are not as if they are. He was not walking in his identity, but I started declaring who he was.
Yeah, at this point, as I said, I lost my Navy job. I did some groundwork, which I hated. I was the world's worst freight forwarder, if you know what that is. That's what I got fired from when she quit her job and we moved back so I could start flight school. I was eventually, even then I was still drifting a little bit, but she started speaking life into me, and I started seeing myself not as a complete failure anymore. And so I was able to kind of start turning the corner at that point in time. And just like everything else, it's not just a constant climb. You know, you go forward, you step back. You know, 2 steps forward, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back sometimes. But yeah, I eventually got on with an airline job, flying for a regional carrier, American Eagle Airlines. You may have heard of it. And so I was finally in that career that I was longing for, but that didn't fix my heart issue. There's still something broken inside of me that I'm not acknowledging at this point in time. I was, and then we moved to DFW.
So we get to DFW, I get back into ministry. I went to work for full-time for a church there. And we learned a life lesson right there in that point in time, that you can't have friends of the opposite sex outside of your marriage. Tim became friends with a flight attendant, and which triggered again my rejection issues.
I became friends with a flight attendant that I was
not sharing with me.
I was keeping it from her. That hiding, avoiding thing again.
But we began to do work again, trying to draw closer. And we did a lot of work, but it wasn't enough. And then I worked at 4 churches later. I feel like we're doing better. I worked at 4 different churches during the season, and I'm finally back in my sweet spot. I'm at a conference in Bethel, and I'm about to start a school of ministry for a church, and they were just releasing me to do all that had been in my heart for a long time. And that night in the hotel, I have a series of dreams, and I'm watching him do pornography in different hotel rooms. I'm like in the room. It was like visions that I was in one room, and then in another room, and then in another room. And when he woke up that morning, I confronted him.
Up until that point, I was keeping up the facade. I led worship in church. I was the church staff person's husband. I was literally telling people not to do porn all the time, and yet here I was. I had been cycling in and out of it, and it had just been kind of ramping up until this moment. She confronted me on it, and I had a choice to make in that moment. I could keep telling her she's crazy, that she's wrong, that she's missing it, or I could finally face it. And
You chose truth.
I chose truth. It was the scariest, hardest thing I've ever done. I had to face this beautiful woman who's believed in me and spoke life to me and made all these sacrifices for me, and tell her I've been hurting her all this time. And face that and risk losing her. But it had to happen. I had to risk losing her to give her a chance to stay.
To choose you.
To choose me back Up at this point, she was married to a stranger.
So I was pretty angry because I was involved in a lot of rescuing sex trafficking and things like that, because the churches that I worked in, and we did fundraising and things like that. So I was pretty involved in a lot of different organizations that I really hated pornography. I really knew what fed that industry. And everything inside me wanted to be done, even though I knew this was covenant, not contract. I wanted to be done. But Jesus is so good. So one night I'm laying in bed and I'm hadn't slept in probably a week, waking up crying, desperate, Jesus, I need you. And one night he wakes me up and he's like, Dawn. And I wake up, and I, to this day, don't know if it was a vision or if it was like a vision in my head or if it was a real experience, because it felt so real. He grabbed my hands, he looked me in the eyes, and he goes, Dawn, this is not about you. I really wanted it to be about me. I really wanted it to be about me. I'm not pretty enough, I'm not sexy enough, I'm not this, I'm not that. I mean, all those rejection things that I had believed, those lies for so long, were completely, fully active now in my imagination. But Jesus goes, Dawn, it's not about you. That's all he said. But I knew what he was saying, that I'm about to give you the man that you've cried out for all these years. And so I said, okay, Jesus. So I did more inner healing. I pursued freedom. And God began to restore my identity. And this time, I willingly walked away from ministry. I gave up my full-time job as a pastor and said, I choose my marriage over ministry. And I'm going to work on this friendship and this relationship and this covenant.
Yes, this Dawn in that moment modeled Jesus in a way that I never got until that happened. I never knew what trust was until I was able to trust her with me, warts and all. That's what Jesus is inviting us into. But I'd kept her at arm's length. I was hiding from her. And when she modeled that and forgave me and decided to work on this and chose me, all of a sudden it revealed to me in a new way this relationship that I have with Jesus. It's a process. It takes constant work. Because of her choosing me and the work that we put down together and the work that I've done on myself, doing counseling, freedom, stuff like that, I haven't had any more issues with porn. It's been since February of 2018, and it's been like I'm born again. And it's I wish it hadn't taken 30 years. I wish I hadn't lied to this beautiful person for 30 years. It's not worth it. Okay? It takes constant diligence in pursuit of connection. Ezekiel 36:26. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and put into you a heart of flesh.
Loving him and submitting my gifts, my strengths, my weaknesses to him now is a joy. Fully submitting is a joy. It's not work. But you cannot submit to God. I just want to say you cannot fully submit to God and not submit to his word regarding forgiveness, regarding trust, and especially this prophetic picture of his bridal paradigm. We get to represent Jesus in the church. Proverbs 3:5-8 became a really important verse to me in that season, in this season. Trust in the Lord completely And do not rely on your own opinions. They really don't matter, just so you know. With all your heart, rely on Him to guide you, and He will lead you in every decision you make. Become intimate with Him in whatever you do, and He will lead you wherever you go. Don't think for a moment that you know it all. For wisdom comes when you adore Him with undivided devotion and avoid everything that's wrong. Then you will find the healing refreshment your body and spirit long for. Then you can be intimate because you let someone see into you. You can be fully transparent, fully honest. But until you're fully transparent, you'll never be fully seen and fully loved. I fully love and fully see this man.
It's amazing.
At our wedding,
At our wedding, sorry. The song we sung at our wedding, and it's truer today than it's ever been. This is now flesh of my flesh.
and bone of my bones,
She shall be called a woman.
because she was taken out of man. Genesis 2:23. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Always fun to hear that story.
Love you.
Especially the time we hear it. We get a chance to live life with these two, and each time we